Look at a mountain, any mountain. Look at the way its base spreads wide across the earth, the way its surface is rough and cracked, the way its top, in so many cases, is not a peak at all, but a flat, broken plateau. Now look at a tree stump, a massive, ancient tree stump, the kind left behind when loggers felled the giants of the Pacific Northwest 100 years ago. Look at the rings, the fissures, the roots spreading outward into the soil. Now look at the mountain again. What you are about to hear will change the way you see every landscape on Earth. Before we go any further, we need to understand what we lost. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the forests of North America contained trees so large that the human mind struggles to comprehend their scale. The coastal redwoods and giant sequoias of California, the Douglas firs of Oregon and Washington, the western red cedars of British Columbia. These were not merely tall trees. They were ecosystems unto themselves. A single redwood could stand over 350 feet tall, with a trunk diameter exceeding 20 feet. Entire families of loggers would pose for photographs standing inside the hollowed-out bases of these trees. And the stumps they left behind were so wide that dance floors were built on top of them. We have photographs of this era. Black and white images showing men with cross-cut saws standing beside trunks that tower above them like living cliffs. Teams of horses pulling single logs on rail carts, each log so large it filled the entire frame. Stumps so massive that a dozen men could stand on the cut surface with room to spare. These photographs are not tricks or exaggerations. They are a record of a world that existed within living memory and was systematically dismantled in the span of a few decades. By the mid-20th century, over 96% of the old-growth forest in the continental United States had been cut down. What remained were stumps, scattered across the landscape like gravestones. But here is where the story takes a turn that most people are not prepared for. What if the trees we call giants, the 300-foot redwoods and the sequoias with trunks you could drive a car through, what if those were not the largest trees that ever existed? What if they were, in fact, the saplings, the undergrowth? The equivalent of grass beneath the canopy of a forest, so vast and so ancient that its true giants reached not hundreds, but thousands of feet into the sky. And what if those giants were not lost to time in the way we assume, but are still here, all around us, hiding in plain sight? Consider Devil's Tower in Wyoming. It rises 867 feet above the Belle Fourche River, a near-perfect column of rock with a flat top and vertical sides scored with deep, parallel grooves. Geologists tell us it is the remnant of an igneous intrusion, magma that cooled underground and was later exposed by erosion. But look at it. Look at the shape, the proportions, the way the grooves run from top to bottom like the fibers of a tree trunk. Look at the flat top, as if something was cut. Look at the base, where the rock spreads outward in formations that bear an uncanny resemblance to roots. The indigenous peoples of the region have their own name for it. Several tribes call it Bear Lodge, and their legends describe it not as a rock formation, but as a tree. A great tree that rose from the earth to protect children from a giant bear, its bark scarred by the bear's claws. Grooves, vertical grooves. Now consider Columnar Basalt, a geological formation found on every continent. It appears as clusters of hexagonal columns tightly packed together, rising vertically from the ground. Giant's Causeway in Ireland, Svartifoss in Iceland, the basalt cliffs of the Columbia River Gorge. Geologists explain columnar basalt as the result of slow cooling of thick lava flows, the hexagonal pattern forming as the material contracts. But place a cross-section of columnar basalt beside a cross-section of petrified wood, and something remarkable happens. The patterns are nearly identical. The hexagonal cells of basalt mirror the cellular structure of wood so precisely that, without a label, many people cannot tell the difference. This is not a coincidence, say the proponents of the theory. It is evidence. Evidence that what we call basalt is, in many cases, petrified wood. The fossilized remains of trees so enormous that their trunks became the geological features we now classify as rock formations. The process of petrification is well documented. Over millions of years, organic material is replaced molecule by molecule with minerals, typically silica, preserving the original structure in stone. We have petrified forests. We have logs turned entirely to quartz and opal. The Petrified Forest in Arizona contains trees that are over 200 million years old. Their wood replaced so perfectly that you can count the growth rings. If a tree can become stone, then why not a mountain? Look at the mesas of the American Southwest, Monument Valley, the Tepui of Venezuela, Table Mountain in South Africa. These are flat-topped elevations with sheer vertical sides, standing alone in otherwise flat terrain. They look unmistakably like stumps. Not weathered peaks, not ridge lines, not volcanic cones, but stumps. Flat on top, as if something was removed. Broad at the base, as if roots once anchored them. Surrounded by debris fields of broken rock that spread outward in patterns remarkably similar to the root systems of fallen trees. And then there are the roots themselves. If these formations were once trees, where are the roots? Look at a topographical map of any major river system. The Amazon, the Mississippi, the Nile. The branching pattern of tributaries flowing into a central channel is identical, mathematically identical, to the branching pattern of roots feeding into a central taproot. Hydrologists call this a dendritic drainage pattern. And the word dendritic comes from the Greek dendron, meaning tree. We name the pattern after trees because it looks like trees. What if it looks like trees because it is trees? What if the river valleys carved into the earth are not the result of water erosion alone, but are the channels left behind by root systems so vast they spanned continents? Go deeper. Look at cave systems. The branching, interconnected tunnels beneath the surface of the earth follow the same fractal patterns as root networks. Carlsbad Caverns, Mammoth Cave, the caves of Waitomo. They twist and branch and reconnect in ways that water alone does not explain. Some researchers have noted that the mineral deposits inside caves, stalactites and stalagmites, bear a structural resemblance to the calcium and mineral deposits found inside living root systems. The caves, they suggest, are the hollow spaces left behind when ancient roots decomposed or were petrified, leaving voids in the surrounding stone. The ancient world is full of references to colossal trees. In Norse mythology, Yggdrasil is the world tree, an immense ash tree that connects the 9 realms of existence. Its roots reach into the underworld, its branches hold up the sky, and its trunk is the axis around which all of creation turns. In Mesopotamian mythology, the Hulupu tree was planted by the goddess Inanna and grew so large that it could not be felled by mortal hands. Hindu cosmology describes the Ashvatha, the sacred fig tree whose roots grow upward and whose branches extend downward into the material world. the Mayan ceiba, the Slavic world oak, the Chinese jianmu. Every ancient civilization describes a tree of impossible size, a tree that connected heaven and earth, a tree that was eventually cut down or destroyed. Are these merely metaphors? Symbolic representations of abstract spiritual concepts? Perhaps. But myths often encode memory. The flood stories found in every culture on Earth are now widely believed to reference actual geological events. What if the world tree myths are doing the same thing? What if they are humanity's collective memory of a time when the Earth was covered in vegetation so massive that individual trees could be seen from horizons away, their canopies forming a second sky? Consider the chemistry. Modern trees are carbon-based life forms. They are made of cellulose, lignin, and water. But the Earth's crust is dominated by silicon, an element that sits directly below carbon on the periodic table and shares many of its chemical properties. Silicon forms bonds in the same tetrahedral pattern as carbon. It can form long chains, complex structures, and, under the right conditions, crystalline matrices. What if the ancient trees were not carbon-based, but silicon-based? What if they grew not from organic chemistry, but from the mineral chemistry of the Earth itself? Drawing silica from the soil and water and building trunks of living crystal that reached miles into the atmosphere. This would explain the petrification. A silicon-based tree would not need millions of years to become stone. It would already be stone, in a sense, a living mineral structure that, upon death, would simply stop growing and begin to weather, its crystal matrix slowly degrading into the quartz, feldspar, and basalt that we find today. The mountains would not be fossils of trees. They would be the trees themselves, dead but still standing, their living chemistry indistinguishable from the geology around them, because they were always made of the same material. The implications are staggering. If the mountains are stumps, then something cut them down. Not erosion, not time, not natural processes, but something with the power to fell a tree that stood 10,000 feet tall and 5 miles wide at the base. What could do such a thing, and why? The flat tops of mesas suggest a clean cut, not a break, not a collapse, but a deliberate removal. Some theorists point to ancient cataclysms, asteroid impacts, global fires, electromagnetic events that could have shattered silicon structures across the planet simultaneously. Others suggest something more unsettling, that they were harvested, cut down by forces or entities operating on a scale we cannot comprehend, for purposes we cannot imagine. We are told that the tallest mountain on Earth is Mount Everest, standing at 29,032 feet. We are told it was formed by the collision of tectonic plates, the Indian plate pushing beneath the Eurasian plate and forcing the rock upward over millions of years. But look at Everest from above. Look at the satellite imagery. The peak is not a point, but a ridge, and the surrounding terrain shows the same radial spreading pattern seen at the base of every stump in every forest on Earth. The Himalayas, the Andes, the Rockies. Could they all be the remains of a forest that once covered the entire planet? We will probably never have definitive proof. The timescales involved are too vast, the evidence too ambiguous, the scientific establishment too committed to existing models. But the questions refuse to go away. Why do so many geological formations look like organic structures? Why do ancient cultures universally describe giant trees? Why does the word for tree branch and the word for river branch use the same language in almost every civilization. Why does columnar basalt look like wood? Why do mesas look like stumps? Why do cave systems look like root networks? The next time you stand at the base of a mountain, do not simply look up. Look closely. Look at the texture of the rock, the pattern of the cracks, the way the base spreads outward. Run your hand along the surface and feel the grooves, the ridges, the layers. Then ask yourself a question that, once asked, cannot be unasked. Is this stone or is this wood? Is this a mountain? Or is this what remains of something that once lived? Something that once grew, something that once reached so high into the sky that its crown brushed the edge of space. The tallest trees on Earth were cut down before you were born. You have been walking on their stumps your entire life. You just did not know what you were looking at. Until now.